Let me provide some background information. Both my wife and I are 54 years old, and we've been married for 31 years. She works as an RN at a hospital, and I've been employed by a home builder since I was 18. We have 2 grown children in their 20s who have moved out of the house. In our mid-40s, we decided to pursue my wide's dream of running a bed breakfast. We had been casually searching for the right property for years. Eventually, we found a 5-acre piece of land with a home dating back to the 1870s. The original owners were prominent landowners in our area with a substantial agricultural business. Over the years, fewer family members wanted to continue farming, so they began selling off parts of the land. Our town has been experiencing growth, primarily due to its natural beauty and attractions, which have attracted tourists. The farmland along the main roads is getting developed rapidly. However, the property we purchased is away from the highways. Since buying it, my wife and I have been working on renovating the entire house. Some basic maintenance had been neglected, and we're committed to restoring the house to its former glory from 150 years ago while making a living from it. My wife has taken charge of decorating the rooms, while I handle the renovations and pay for materials, as well as any professional help if needed. I'm quite handy, so I do most of the work myself. In recent years, the housing industry has seen substantial growth. We were working tirelessly, and I was earning a substantial income until last year. The pandemic forced us to stop working for a while in 2020, and then we faced material shortages. Throughout this time, my wife, being a frontline worker, worked non-stop at the hospital for 18 months. Last year, she often worked for weeks without taking a day off. The medical staff stayed at the hospital, sharing rooms, and grew very close. They worked in cycles of 4 weeks on and 2 weeks off, starting in March of last year and continuing into the fall, then again after Thanksgiving. After our kids grew older, my wife had been open to working for others if they needed help. She witnessed young parents who couldn't visit their families and would give up her time off to support the staff who really needed it. Others on the team did this too. The whole experience with COVID changed her. Witnessing people being put on ventilators and the deaths had a significant impact. She became a different person, more distant. Our intimacy came to a halt. I thought it was due to her experiences or her age. I tried discussing it, but she told me she just didn't feel the same anymore. We continued to work closely on the house. We had planned trips to an area in our state known for its large Amish population, renowned for woodworking and sewing craftsmanship. We purchased several pieces of furniture for the bedrooms and handmade quilts. This past weekend, we were preparing for a 3-day trip to buy dining room furniture from that area. I also barter some wood I acquire when dismantling old barns, which I do as a side job. Barn wood is in high demand. However, my boss informed me that everyone would be working the whole week because he managed to get the necessary supplies. I told my wife we could go on Saturday and Sunday, but on Friday morning, she informed me that she would still be going with some co-workers because there was a fall festival happening too. That night, I went to a local bar. One of her co-workers approached me and I asked her if she was going on the trip. She had no knowledge of it, so I texted my wife, inquiring if she had arrived safely and who was with her. She responded that her friend, another close friend, and someone named Stevie were with her. I had heard this name mentioned in the past few months and initially assumed it was a woman. I asked her friend at the bar if she knew this Stevie, but she said no, though she mentioned a man named Steven who worked with them. My wife returned on Sunday afternoon with bags containing tablecloths, napkins, kitchen towels, and more. As she showed me what she had bought, she found a smaller bag within one of the larger ones. After peeking inside, she said, "Oh, not this bag. It's not for us." I decided to let it go. However, later when I checked the bag, I discovered that she had hidden decorations meant for a man cave dedicated to a college sports team I wasn't interested in. I asked to have a conversation with her, inquiring once more about the people who went on the trip. She mentioned the same 3 individuals. I specifically asked about Stevie, whom we hadn't met. She said he was a woman they worked with. I then revealed the man cave decorations and asked her again who Stevie was. She began crying and confessed that he was a man. And yes, they had been involved in an affair since last year during the hospital lockdown. Now she's living in one of the completed bedrooms and I'm in our bedroom. I intend to consult with the lawyer on Monday. I'm uncertain about how to handle the house, the business, and the marriage. To me, it appeared that she was sorry about getting caught, but not for the affair. I asked her if she would end the relationship with Stevie, and she was uncertain. Update. The past few weeks have been quite busy. My work and side jobs have picked up, but my wife and I have been having disputes. I consulted with a lawyer, and after explaining everything, he suggested that we try to resolve our issues before getting him involved. Currently, our house isn't operating as a business, so it can't be sold that way. We'd have to sell it as an unfinished house, which would likely lower the price. We've invested well over $100,000 into the house, not including the mortgage. The lawyer will need to consult with a real estate attorney, and possibly a business attorney, so their fees will be substantial. I attempted to approach my wife to see if we could talk. I'm not sure if she's embarrassed about being caught, but she's become quite stubborn. She asked me to leave the house, but I expressed that I had no intentions of doing so. In response, she proposed that I give up the master suite and move into one of the bedrooms. Once again, I told her I wasn't planning on that. She then threatened to move all my belongings into the foyer over the next couple of days for me to decide where I'd stay. So I decided to end the conversation. I went to where I store my supplies and retrieved a new door lock with a push-button keypad, which I had intended to install on the bedroom doors when we had guests. The combination can be changed after each guest. I installed it on the master suite door. The next day, I went to work, and when I returned home, I found a series of angry messages regarding the lock. She was furious, exclaiming, "How dare you lock me out of my bedroom?" After going back and forth, I asked if we could please talk, and she finally agreed. Later that evening, we sat down. I expressed how hurt I was upon learning about the affair and mentioned that I wished she had told me she was unhappy. She remained silent. So, I continued, stating that as far as I'm concerned, the marriage is over. She simply nodded. I then informed her that I had consulted an attorney, which caught her by surprise. I explained what the attorney had advised, emphasizing that it would be best if we could come to some agreement. Our most significant asset is the house, and selling it would result in a substantial loss. She smiled and claimed, "I can prove that I have paid the mortgage, so the house is mine." I shook my head and said no. My attorney had clarified that the house is a marital asset since both our names are on the mortgage. I then showed her a couple of binders where I had organized every receipt by room, detailing how much of my money I had spent on refurbishing the house, thousands in total. The receipts caught her completely by surprise. She hasn't consulted an attorney yet. I suggested that we live peacefully together, complete the house, and then establish the B&B. At that point, she could buy me out of the business. However, she remained obstinate. She insisted on me leaving. If not, she has plans to move Stevie, in. I decided to get up and fetch a glass of water to gather my thoughts. Upon returning to the table, I told her that if I see him in the house or on the property, I would start undoing everything that has been done. I would remove every nail and screw I've put in, take down every light and plumbing fixture. I clarified that I wouldn't destroy them because I own them, but I'd replace them with salvaged materials. I suggested she should think it over, consult with whoever is giving her advice, and let me know. Yesterday she approached me, and we hadn't spoken in several days. She asked if we could talk again. She mentioned that she had talked to our kids, and I had informed each of them about the situation. Our daughter proposed to her that we stay in the house until it's completed. We could start the business as I had suggested, and perhaps I could move out later, but still retain a 50% ownership. Mom could run the business, hiring a few employees to help manage the place, do yard work, and give Mom a day off. I told her I would think about it, but my stance on Steven would not change. So I have scheduled another appointment with an attorney. The major issue is that we probably won't be in business until 2023. The exterior needs substantial work along with landscaping, and we need to arrange a room for one of us to live in. The room I currently occupy is part of the rooms for rent. Update. I've been recovering from a stroke for almost 4 months now, and I'm gradually getting back to my normal self. My wife and I were in the middle of discussing how we should divide our assets, as advised by our lawyers. During our conversation, I suddenly had another stroke. I was fine one moment and then I collapsed to the floor. Thankfully, my wife, who is a registered nurse, recognized something was wrong when she asked if I was okay, and I suddenly fell. She immediately called 911 and informed them that I was having a stroke. I spent a week in the hospital and then went to rehabilitation. My wife had taken a leave from work to take care of me when I returned home. I believe her presence and care greatly contributed to my recovery. She returned to work in January when she felt I could manage on my own to some extent. Our kids visit me when she works her 12-hour shifts. I'm not entirely sure if she's still involved with Stevie, as she spent 2 months by my side. However, she has taken a couple of 3-day holidays on her own, which makes me suspect their relationship might still be ongoing. Currently, discussions about divorce have been set aside. I want to express my gratitude to those who have been inquiring about my updates and sending me direct messages asking about my whereabouts. I'm steadily getting better. I do have some mobility issues, making it impossible for me to return to work, so I might need to explore other options. Update. I've initiated the divorce process, and at first I had some doubts. It might be due to my health problems that clouded my judgment. During my recovery, my soon-to-be ex-wife was quite caring and supportive. Once I regained my independence and self-sufficiency, I started to notice certain things. My wife would frequently spend weekends away from home, maybe once or twice a month. Our kids would come over to help out. Now I've come to realize that she was either visiting Stevie or going away with him. The kids caught on to the situation rather quickly. My daughter, in particular, has distanced herself from my soon-to-be ex-wife, and their relationship is now non-existent, which is unfortunate. My son, on the other hand, doesn't approve of her actions but hasn't severed ties. We've had discussions about divorce and dividing our assets, and it seems we'll manage it amicably. Neither of us can afford to buy the other's share. We've enlisted the help of a business broker who found a company, somewhat similar to Airbnb, which has made us a great offer for our property. So we'll proceed with the divorce and move forward once it's finalized in a month or two. The property sale will follow shortly after. My health is not completely restored, and it might never be. Fortunately, I have a supportive boss who's accommodating as I transition into my new role as a project manager for him.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
Story 2. I've been married to my wife for 12 years, and we have an amazing 11-year-old son. Until last night, I believed our marriage was good. I always tried to be good to her, and we didn't have financial or intimacy issues. I never took her for granted, and I genuinely felt grateful every day that she was my wife. But now, I'm not sure what to think. Yesterday, after work, I received a call from my local police department. They asked me to come to the police station as soon as possible. I was panicked and feared something had happened to my wife or son. However, they assured me that there was no danger to them and just asked me to come to the station. When I arrived at the station, they placed me in a room with a table and chairs. They started asking me about a guy my wife works with, whom I haven't seen or spoken to since our company's Christmas party in December 2019. The officers kept asking questions like, "How long have you known?" and "How did you find out?" I was puzzled and could only respond with, "What are you talking about?" After about an hour, I stopped answering their questions and repeatedly asked about the whereabouts and safety of my wife and son. This back and forth went on for around 2 hours, with the officers periodically leaving the room for 15 to 20 minutes before returning to continue the questioning, like in a cheesy cop show. During their final visit, they showed me a video on a tablet of my wife and the guy from her work having closeness. I couldn't remember much after that, except for repeatedly screaming, "What the heck is this?" I had a severe panic attack right there at the police station. A paramedic checked me out and my blood pressure was incredibly high. He suggested going to the hospital, but I declined as I needed to locate my wife and son. After I calmed down, the officers explained that the man in the video had been having an affair with my wife, as well as with several other women. He was discovered that morning, brutally beaten in his driveway. He was still alive but in critical condition, and there were doubts about his survival. His wife granted permission for authorities to check his phone and computer where they found the video involving my wife. They inquired about my whereabouts that morning, and I informed them that I had been at the gym and later at work, which is about a 10-minute drive from the gym. At that point, they allowed me to leave. However, they suggested that I might not want to stay at my house, as they suspected the attack might be related to his affair with my wife. They also mentioned that my wife was not the only person he was having an affair with. Hearing this, I hurried home. I arranged for my son to stay with our neighbors. Then we packed some clothes and his school laptop. I grabbed my tool, and we headed to my parents' house, which is a 45-minute drive away. I still haven't received any word from my wife. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. I've contacted the officer who gave me his card, and he informed me that she is at the hospital with the man she's been cheating with. I'm now in bed with my son on one side and my tool on the other. My dad is sleeping in his chair in the living room with his tool on his lap, and I haven't slept in over 30 hours. I feel lost and confused, not knowing where to start. Update. For those who question the authenticity of my post, my only response is that I genuinely wish it were not true. Sometimes real-life events can be even more unbelievable than fiction. To those who couldn't find a news story, it seems that due to the nature of the attack, many details were kept confidential. Even local news outlets only briefly mentioned it as an assault during their nightly news. To those who insinuated that the police wouldn't do that, I must disagree. They did. I learned from my attorney that the police have significant leeway in their actions and statements, especially when you're not under arrest. They can even lie directly to your face, which they did in my case. It turns out my wife was not at the hospital with her lover when I contacted the detective. She had actually been admitted to the hospital's psychiatric facility much earlier in the day, while he was still in surgery. I don't know why they would fabricate that, but they did. This situation has made me very skeptical of law enforcement. After regaining consciousness that afternoon, I reached out to my uncle's law partner, who is also a family friend. He visited my parents' house to discuss my options with me. His entire law firm is now representing me in both the divorce and criminal defense. On that Sunday, he obtained an emergency custody order and a protective order against my wife for me, my son, and my parents. Our court date is set for 60 days from now. The police served her with the order on Monday as she was leaving the psychiatric hospital. According to her brother, who is a close friend of mine, she did not take it well. She is currently staying with her parents. I still haven't had a conversation with her, and she hasn't made any effort to contact me either. I'm not sure if this is due to her feeling ashamed, indifferent, or the restraining order. Regardless, I'm relieved. My wife is not the person I believed her to be, and I regret not seeing it earlier. I had to have a conversation with my son, and I chose to be honest with him, explaining things in an age-appropriate way. Surprisingly, his immediate response was, "Please don't let mommy take me away." I asked him why he said that, and he shared that my wife had been treating him poorly when I wasn't around. She told him that if he told me, she would take him away and he would never see me again. She has been emotionally hurting our son, and I didn't realize it. Honestly, this affected me more than the video. I informed my lawyer about my son's statement, and he used that along with my wife's mental state and commitment to obtain emergency custody. I've reached out to his school for therapy resources, and he will start therapy in the new year. I feel like the worst father right now. Regarding our families, her parents contacted me on Tuesday and asked to visit us. I was still at my parents' place, and I allowed them to come but made it clear that my wife couldn't be near us. They agreed. They were incredibly apologetic, and her mother couldn't stop crying the whole time. Her father was heartbroken and referred to my wife as that girl. They both felt that something was wrong with her, and they didn't raise her to be this way. We hugged and cried before they left, and I assured them that they would always be a part of our lives, regardless of what happens with the divorce. After what my son told me, their visit was the most challenging part of this whole ordeal. My lawyers have been doing remarkable work. They discovered that the man my wife was involved with has a lengthy criminal record. One of the lawyers told me that when they printed out the guy's arrest record, it took the printer 5 minutes straight. From what they found, he is currently on parole for pills-related offenses and has had ties to gangs in the past. He's still alive but in critical condition and may not make it. The law firm's investigator contacted the co-worker who drove my wife to the hospital. The co-worker informed them that my wife's affair was an open secret at the office. My lawyers believe that's how the police identified me and my wife in the video. There are several photos from last year's Christmas party at her workplace, and my wife and I are in many of them. That's where I stand in this whole situation. I'm just numb, lost, and heartbroken. How long does this numbness last? And is there a way to move past this emotional numbness more quickly? I mean, genuinely numb, like it's all a dream. Everything I've just shared feels like it's happening to someone else. Update. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to everyone who responded to both my original post and my update. This subreddit has been incredibly helpful to me. If I didn't reply to you individually, I apologize, as I received so many messages that I can't keep up with all of them. First, I want to share that my son is doing much better. He started therapy in the first week of January, and we're already seeing a noticeable difference. I asked him if he was comfortable with me talking to his therapist, and he agreed, so I've had a few discussions with her. According to the therapist, my soon-to-be ex-wife would verbally and emotionally offend our son whenever they were alone together. He wasn't allowed to make noise or bother her in any way when he was at home. She would leave him alone for extended periods, even overnight when I was out of town. She would then threaten him with being taken away and never seeing me again, if he told me or anyone else. The therapist explained that this made him feel powerless and dependent at a stage in his development, when he should be feeling empowered and self-reliant. In light of this, I've purchased a phone for him and helped him memorize family members' phone numbers and relevant addresses. I've been teaching him situational awareness, how to pay attention to street names and read addresses on buildings. We've also role-played how to ask people for help and how he can clearly communicate to strangers that he's in trouble and doesn't feel safe. I realize this may sound simple, but my son can be somewhat introverted and shy when he doesn't feel comfortable. Even though we've only been doing this for a few weeks, I can see that it's genuinely boosting his confidence. I would greatly appreciate any suggestions on how to further enhance his self-reliance. His safety and well-being remain my top priorities. As for myself, I'm coping as well as can be expected. I started therapy around the same time as my son, and although I don't speak to my therapist as much as he does, it has helped me talk through my thoughts and feelings about everything that has happened to us and our family. The numbness has dissipated, but it has been replaced by a burning anger in the pit of my stomach whenever I think of my soon-to-be ex and what she has put our family through. Interestingly, even though I dislike feeling angry, it's easier to handle than the numbness. My therapist mentioned that this is part of the grieving process, and what matters is not how we feel, but how we channel these emotions. Regarding my legal situation, I must admit it's the most intimidating challenge I've ever faced in my life. I was given temporary full custody of my son and child support. Although I didn't initially want it, my lawyer insisted we request it. The order of protection for my son and me was also extended. During the request for an order hearing, which my wife and her lawyer didn't attend, the judge inquired about allowing supervised visitation. However, my son strongly refused, which is why I brought him along as my lawyer advised. The judge asked my son if he would talk to him privately, and my son agreed. They had a meeting in chambers with the judge, a stenographer, and a child welfare officer, which lasted about 10 minutes. Following this meeting, the judge granted the temporary orders and ordered therapy and a psychological evaluation for my son. Fortunately, the therapist he's seeing has a connection or accreditation to work with the courts, so he doesn't need to see another therapist. My lawyer explained that this is positive because his therapist can provide a custody recommendation. Still, I'm fearful that she might get some form of custody despite what she put our son through. Regarding the other person involved, I don't have much information. According to my lawyers, he's alive but still in the hospital. I haven't had any contact with the police since my initial interview, so there are no new updates there. As for my soon-to-be ex-wife, I hadn't seen her since the day I was questioned until Thursday. She tried to call me a few times, but I didn't answer. When she called from another number, I hung up immediately. I have no desire to engage in a conversation with her or hear anything she has to say. Her lawyer requested a preliminary hearing for our court-appointed mediation. She was served in the second week of January. She attended the meeting with her lawyer, and I know it might sound petty, but even with the mask, she didn't look well. My STBX used to be an attractive and athletic woman. I swear in our wedding photos, she resembled a supermodel. However, now she's lost a significant amount of weight, which is concerning. She appeared unwell and fragile. She didn't even make eye contact with me and mostly kept her face down throughout the meeting. In a nutshell, their requests were quite absurd. They sought visitation during the divorce proceedings and shared custody afterward. They also wanted us to drop the order of protections. On top of that, she proposed living together until the divorce is finalized, which is honestly unbelievable after everything that's happened. It was so disrespectful that it gave me a pounding headache throughout the entire meeting. However, it was all worthwhile when we disclosed a surprise to her lawyer. During the discussion of how to handle the division of assets, my lawyer reacted with astonishment and said, "What division of assets? Read the prenup." The expression on her lawyer's face was absolutely priceless. She hadn't informed her lawyer about the prenuptial agreement. My late uncle, the founding partner of the law firm I'm using, drafted that prenup. He even hired her a lawyer to review it before we got married. According to my lawyer, it's a masterpiece because we adhered to my late uncle's instructions by keeping our finances separate. The house we live in was a gift from my uncle to me before our marriage. All the utilities and insurances are in my name. Each vehicle is registered only in the owner's name. We never had to co-sign for each other's debts. We do have one joint savings account for household expenses and emergencies, which used to hold around $8,000, but she has already emptied it, leaving less than $300. The prenup stipulates that marital assets and debts are to be divided equally, and ownership of intangible assets and personal debts reverts to the individual who incurred them. The adultery clause is simple. It means that if either party is caught or admits to committing adultery, they forfeit any claim to spousal support. There's more to it, but my lawyer assures me that trying to challenge this prenup will be exceptionally difficult because it's one of the most equitable prenups he's ever seen. The last request from her lawyer has deeply affected me. They asked to delay the official mediation for 6 months while my wife attends an inpatient rehab for substance use. A few people in my previous posts mentioned her possible substance use, but I never really considered it until now. It was hard for me to even imagine. I talked to my lawyer about it, and he said we'd discuss it and respond to their proposal. Before we left, my wife spoke for the first time and handed me a letter she had written. My lawyer gave me a cautionary look, but after some internal debate, I took the letter. Regrettably, I wish I hadn't. The letter began with all those cliché lines cheaters use that everyone warned me about. I love you. I love our family. I know I mistreated our son, and I hate myself for it. I want us again. But she did admit that she started using her medication after a major surgery she had about 2 years ago. Eventually, she began buying these pills from her colleagues, including the other person. He became her main supplier, and when she ran out of money, she started sleeping with him to compensate. She concealed all of this from me because she was afraid I'd make her stop, and she felt unable to function normally without the medication. According to her, he meant nothing more to her than a source for her fix, and she deeply regrets her actions, both for herself and our family. Now she claims to understand how terrible her actions were and wants to get better for the sake of our family. She's asking me to at least give her some time to prove her commitment. For the record, let me clarify that I will never reconcile with my wife. Our marriage ended the moment she cheated on me and mistreated our son. However, I can't help but wonder where I was during all of this. I feel like the most gullible, oblivious person on earth. Moreover, how should I navigate this situation from here? Am I merely discarding her, or is my sense of betrayal still justified? I'm filled with anger and resentment towards her, and it's hard to treat someone battling the demons she's facing. I'm utterly lost and feeling hopeless once again.